just a closer walk with thee, for your love will make the difference in me. Oh, there's no place I'd rather be than beneath your wings of serenity. Oh,
Greetings to you all. Greetings. I am King Clifford Jefferson, a Senator of Godfrey, the fifth Canaanite Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. I'm the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, which we know as the King of Peace, Melchizedek, King of Righteousness, and all the above. It is October 29th, 2025, which is equivalent to the birth year 2975. I greet you in the name of our Jesus Christ, King Edgar the Peaceful, which I'm the reincarnation of in this present day. I greet you in the name of the ancestors, the predecessors, the successors. I greet you in the name of all those who try to get an understanding of what it is that we are here and now called to do. This lesson is called The Ancient Canaanites Are the Plantagenet, Heirs, and Successors. The ancient Canaanites are the Plantagenet heirs and successors. I know that might be hard for a lot of you to believe, but it's going to be proven today. In fact, in law. Going all the way back to the concept which we call time immemorial, time out of mind. Everyone hold that thought. Okay. Time immemorial. All right, we know when we say time immemorial, it's a term meaning time out of mind. Okay, a time where the physical body cannot go. Okay, only the mind can go. Okay, we do this by what we call autobiological memory or engrams. Okay, memory of your past self. Okay, it's very important because you are what your forefathers were without doubt or contradiction. Okay, Like, share, subscribe, donate, free and common focus to $ Clifford Jefferson L or the Third Convention Church of England. And with that, we get started with this marvelous lesson. The ancient Canaanites are, in fact, us, the Plantagenet, heirs, and successors, based upon that ancient promise that was promised to the ancient Canaanites called the Promised Land. Okay? We're going to look at that in its fullest content. Let's get started. What better way to start with is the promise from Yahweh. Okay? Yahweh was the Canaanite deity. Okay? Yahweh was the Canaanite deity. Let's not get caught up in the name, y'all. Let's not get caught up in the name, the character. Let's get caught up in the purpose and intent of what this fiction God represents. Okay? Fiction, meaning not real, meaning it is not could be seen in our physical reality. Not to say that it don't exist, but the fact it does not exist in our present reality. That is what makes it fiction. Okay? It's not being applied in our present society based upon the laws given by who? Yahweh. I am that I am. Yahweh was an ancient Semitic deity, weather and war. And the southern eastern ancient Levant, and the national god of Iron Age kingdoms of Israel and Judah. So we're talking about the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah, which were the ancient people living in what they presumed to be ancient Levant, okay? In southeastern part of what we call ancient Levant. Yahweh was a national god of the Iron Age in regards to the two kingdoms, a united monarchy, okay? The two kingdoms of Israel and Judah. The direct war that we're having right now, called the Gaza conflict between the Israelites and the Palestinians, are a direct result going back to this God of war. Look what's going on. War. Hold that thought. It'll be a very good one. Once again, a God of war and of weather. Here you have God of weather, Yahweh, and fire. Okay, God of weather, war, and fire. Sitting on a wheel. God on a winged wheel coin. This sounds more like tanks, things that move. Okay. Major coat, Jerusalem. Winged disc. It can also be airplanes. Okay. Winged wheel. Tanks. All right. Army vehicles. All right. Very, very, very important. In the oldest biblical text, Yahweh possesses attributes that were typically ascribed to deities of weather and war, fruitifying the land of Israel, also called the land of Jerusalem, that were composed of two kingdoms under a united monarchy, but they don't have monarchies right now, okay? The kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israelites, going back to the origin, which was the ancient Canaanites. The early Israelites, point so, Yahweh possessed attributes that were typically ascribed to the deities of weather and war, fortifying the land of Israel and leading a heavily army against the enemies of the Israelites. You hear that? Leading, read it again. All right, read it again. Yahweh possessed attributes that were typically ascribed to deities of weather and war, fortifying the land of Israel and leading a heavily army against the enemies of the Israelites. The early Israelites engaged in polytheistic practices that were common across ancient Semitic religions because the Israelite religion was a derivative of the Canaanite religion and included a variety of deities from it, including El, Asherah, and Baal. Okay, all going back to what? The Iron Age. Okay, you had the Bronze Age, you had the Iron Age, you had the Stone Age. Okay, very, very important to understand this. All right. All right, that's enough of that. Yahweh. So we know the God Yahweh, who he represents. Okay, let's go to the ancient Canaan. I need to write these terms down. You're gonna keep up. You're going back to time out of mind. The physical body can't go. Only the mind. So this has to deal with our mental understanding of the timeline. Because as I always say, he who writes your books set what? Your timeline. Time never was when we were not. As the life begins, the time will come when we will be no more. So we got to be careful about who write our stories or who tell our stories. All right. Who declares of what land we were on. Remember, we didn't make maps. The people who lived on the landmass never made maps of their own landmass. What need would it be to make maps on your own landmass if you already live on the landmass? That would pretty much be uh, uh, um, pretty much creating a new story, because if we can see the maps based upon the narratives who created the maps and what the map narrate, it's very important to understand that that's not what the land looked like prior to those maps being created. Okay, we have to realize that when we lived on our own land, we didn't need to create maps. You know what I'm saying? Pictograms, etc. All right, very important to understand that those who under conquest, discovery, uh, um, uh, what we call uh, uh, land usage. This is the purpose and intent for creating maps. Okay, very important. Canaan was an ancient Semitic speaking people, civilization, rather, and the region of southern Levant. There we go again, southern Levant. Yahweh was a deity going back to the Iron Age and southern Levant during the late second millennium BC. Okay, Canaan had significant geopolitical importance in the late Bronze Age or Minor period, from the 14th century BC, as the area where the spheres of interest of the Egyptians, Hittites, Mitanni, and Assyrian Empire converged or overlapped. Much of present-day knowledge about Canaan stemmed from archaeological excavations in these areas at sites such as Tel Hazar, Tel Megiddo, in the Soar, and Gezer. If I read that right, please. If I read it wrong, please forgive me. Okay. All in reference to the next paragraph. The name Canaan appears throughout the Bible as a geography associated with a promised land. That is the key point that we want to focus on. A promised land. The demonym Canaanite serves as an ethnic catch, all term covering various indigenous populations, both settled in nomadic pastoral groups throughout the region of the southern Levant, based upon that storyteller. Okay, as I said, he will write your books, set your timeline. You know what I'm saying? And we know that the Bible talks about a bunch of groups of people. Okay, we know that the Bible, as we see it today, and we are reading English, which we're reading English, we can interpret it based upon how the Hebrew interpret it, or how the people who speak Jesus interpret it, or the people who speak Arabic interpret it. We have to look at it, the storyline, based upon it being in English. Okay, the language we're reading right now is English. Okay, so we have to relate that story to the English people based upon the origin of the ancient Canaanites and the so-called God called Yahweh. You know what I'm saying? Which we see here is a God of war, which according to our story, our God was not a God of war. He was a God of peace. Because when God created the world was created in peace. Okay, for us to live on it. Of course, it took some chaos to establish the peaceful world. You know what I'm saying? As a result of the state of evolution, but nonetheless, the promised land was for a promise of a land flowing with what? Milk and honey. Okay? So a key term that you need to write down is Yahweh, Canaan, and that term promised land. Okay? The Denim Canaanites serve as the ethnic catch-all term covering various indigenous population. So a lot of these people claim to be the people who is supposed to inherit what? The promised land. Okay? The promised land throughout the region of southern Levant. It is by far the most frequently used ethnic term in the Bible. You hear that, y'all? Very important. So let's deal with this promised land first. What is the promised land? Promised land. Promised by God. In Abrahamic religion, the promised land refers to an area of Levant that God chose to bestow upon via a series of covenants that families and descendants of Abraham. You hear that? The promised land. A promise, an oath, an agreement, a contract about inheritance of land. This is called an estate of inheritance, a state that is perpetual. Okay? Very important. In the context of the Hebrew Bible, these descendants are originally understood to have been the Israelites, okay, whose forefathers was Jacob, whose son was Abraham, son of Isaac. The concept of the promised land largely overlapped with the land of Israel, Zion, or the Holy Land, in a biblical religious sense, and with Canaan or Palestine, i.e., Israelites or Palestinians, all right, in a secular geographic sense. Although the book of Numbers provides some definition for the promised land boundaries, they are not delineated with precision, but it is universally accepted that the core area lies in and around Jerusalem. Okay, key point, write that word down. Jerusalem. According to the biblical accounts, the promised land was not inherited until the Israelite conquest of Canaan. Okay, once again, according to the biblical account, the promised land was not inherited until the Israelites' conquest of Canaan, which took place shortly after what? The Exodus. We know what Exodus means, right? The exposing of the true Jews. All right. The Exodus deals with the expulsion of the true Jews. We got the fictitious story, and then we got the legal fiction story that was created based upon King James, who was the King of England, and we know that 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 goes back to what we call the Old Alliance. Okay, the Old Alliance, and alliance is a contract. A contract is an oath. Let's just see that real quick. Old Alliance, or Old Alliance. Oh, let's start. talking about promised land, a promise based upon land. Okay, that apparently when we look at what's going on right now over in the Gaza conflict, the promise is not fulfilled. Okay, we got one claiming to be Palestinians, we got other claiming to be Israelites. One from are assuming to be from the kingdom of uh, um, Israelites claiming to be two distinct but groups of people, but of the same people, the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel. Then you got the Palestinians, and then the Palestinians goes back to the all those who are associated with Arabic, and we can prove that by going to the conquest of the Levant, which is the place or origin of this whole story. Okay, Old Alliance was an alliance between the Kingdom of Scotland and France against England, made in 1295. Very, very important. This is England and Scotland and France, where Scotland and France are against England. That goes back into what we call the First Crusades, all right? The First Crusade is also goes back to the time what we call the Kingdom of Jerusalem, okay? The Kingdom of Jerusalem. If we go to the alliances, the Frankish Scottish alliance against England was in 1295. That goes into what we call the exodus of those uh, uh, Scottish, what is called what we call the expulsion of the Jews in 1295. Okay, expulsion of the Jews. Matter of fact, just let me look that up real quick. I'm glad I thought about that. Matter of fact, now I'm not going to do that because I don't want my screen messing up. But it says birth of the Old Alliance following the national turmoil caused by the deaths of Scotland, 7-year-old Queen designated Margaret, the Maid of Norway, in 1290. Edward I took the opportunity to extend the authority over Scotland. Okay, over Scotland. In response, the Council of 12, which had taken over the government of Scotland temporarily, sought to find allies abroad. Alliances with France was a logical fit. As Philip IV declared England's possession of Gascony forfeit in 1294, bringing France and England close to a war. In October 1295, a Scottish embassy to France agreed to the Treaty of Paris, which was signed on October 23rd. Let me see if they mentioned the Scottish independence. It probably is, but I'm not going to go through the lesson. Okay. So we see the old alliance. We know that the old alliance in 1295 go back to the alliances of the Frankish and opposite alliance called the opposite Carolingian alliance. That goes back to those who were affiliated with Frankish descendants and which were Carolingians and those who were associated with what we call the Ottoman Empire. Okay, you can visit that on your own time for the sake of the lesson. I have to move forward. Okay, let's go back. Right here. Promised land. Okay, we have promised land. That's the key point. All this is about a promised land. Okay, that we will soon inherit. Forget the characters who took part in it because it wasn't for them. It's for their descendants to inherit what we call the promised land. The successors, the heirs, they were those who were supposed to inherit the promised land. And there has been no conveyance of the promised land based upon the promise of the land, as we see in the landmass that we see now called Jerusalem or Israel or Palestine, all taking place over there in that landmass known as what we call um, Canaan. Okay, Canaan. In the context of the Hebrew Bible, the descendants are originally understood to have been the Israelites, who forefathers of Jacob, who was son of Abraham, son of Isaac. The concept of the promised land largely overlapped with the land of Israel, Zion, or the Holy Land, in biblical religious sense, and with Canaan or Palestine in a secular geographic sense. We call that the kingdom of Jerusalem. Okay? The kingdom of Jerusalem. All right? We have to understand that when we go back into that time era, especially when we look at it from a legal perspective, we have to understand that that time era is what we call, in our understanding, time immemorial. So let's look at the time immemorial, to understand the promised land, Canaan, the ancient Canaanites. All right, we have to look at the concept of time immemorial. Write this down. Time immemorial is a phrase meaning time extending beyond the reach of a physical memory or a tangible record or a practice tradition, and definitely ancient. Ancient beyond memory or record, okay? This means that it ain't written down. It's just something that they did, okay? And a lot of us claim that be incorporating things that our ancestors did, going based upon time immemorial, but not being applicable to law. So it will always remain a fiction. If it becomes, if it's interpreted based upon law, the concept of time immemorial, then automatically would wind up what we call a legal fiction, or what we call a wait and see clause, okay? Or wait and see doctrine, or what they call now rule against perpetuity, okay? Time immemorial is a phrase meaning time extending beyond the reach of memory, record, or tradition, and definitely ancient. Ancient beyond memory or record, the phrase is used in legally significant context as well as in common parlance. Let's look at what it means in law, because majority look at you from the first paragraph. When we look at it from the second paragraph, because it all involves a promised land. Okay? A promised land. So in order for you to have some land, ain't nobody came from out of the sky to give you land. No one has given you land based upon the customs and practices, based upon those prior to you, and the way they lived on the land. All right, because you're still subject to that law. So in law, the word time immemorial denotes to a period of time beyond which legal memory cannot go. Once again, in law, time immemorial denotes a period of time beyond which legal memory cannot go, and time out of mind. So we're talking about legal memory. Most frequently, the phrase time immemorial appears as a legal term of art in judicial discussion of what? Common law, development, and in the United States. And the property rights of what? Native Americans. So in law, the concept of time immemorial denotes to inclusively and exclusively the United States, okay? And those native to the what we call the United States or America, we know based upon the map, this is not America, because this was inhabited by the English Empire within the continent of what we call North America. We must understand that, all right? Time immemorial, a time where memory cannot go. Let's look at it, y'all. English and American common law. Time immemorial is frequently used to describe time required for a custom to mature into a common law. Medieval historian Richard Barber describes this as a watershed between a primary oral culture, and a world where writing was paramount. Common law is a body of law identified by judges, judicial proceedings, rather than created by a legislator. Judges determine the common law by pinpointing the legal principle consistent in reiterating its previous legal cases over a long period of time. Okay? So if you claim to be somebody and can't go into a court of law and prove it, then you have a problem. It said in English law, time immemorial ends and legal memory begins. Did you hear that, y'all? Did you hear that? In English law, time immemorial, meaning time out of mind, where the memory or the body, where the memory cannot go. Okay? All right, based upon the precept or the customs that majority of people practice versus or contrast to English law, where time immemorial ends and legal memory begins. Okay, legal memory creating a legal fiction creates a bridge between the literal text of the law, going back to the laws denoting to those time eras where the physical body can go, i.e., time immemorial. So English law, time immemorial ends and legal memory begins at 1189. So if you don't know anything between the time era of the 12th century until present, you in a world of problems, such as those who are over dealing with the Gaza conflict in regards to those who call themselves the Israelites and the Palestinians, in regards to some land that they call Jerusalem, in regards to a history that was derived from the ancient Canaanites, that was under a deity called Yahweh, which was a god of war and fire. And the only thing you see over there right now is what? War and fire. That is not a peaceful transition. That involves conquest, invasion, all right, etc. In English law, time immemorial ends and legal memory begins at 1189, and end of the reign of who? King Henry II, son of Godfrey, the fifth count of Anjou, ruler of Jerusalem. King of Jerusalem. Richard, time immemorial is denoted from Richard the Lionheart, time immemorial. Okay? Right here in the box, Richard I of Lionheart being anointed during his coronation and Westminster Abbey in 1189 from 13th century chronicle. Anytime before the ascension of Richard I is considered time immemorial in English law. You hear that? This is a Plantagenet king. All right? Very important, because when we talk about the Crusade Wars from the 1st to the 9th, which was the last Crusade War, why? Because that king at the last Crusade War, which happened to be in Levant, dealing with the same conflict of who the heirs and successors are in regard to the story going back to the ancient Canaanites, which involves those known as the Kingdom of Judah and the Kingdom of Israel, which were under a united monarchy, which meaning one monarchy based upon what we call the demise of the crown. So say English law, time immemorial ends and legal memory begins at 1189 and ends at the end of the reign of King Henry II, who is associated with the invention of the English common law. As common law is found to have a non-historical immemorial event, it is distinct from laws created by monarchs or legislative bodies on a fixed date. In English law, time immemorial has been used to specify a time required to establish a prescription right. Did you hear that? A prescriptive right. What is a prescriptive right? Prescriptive right is a right of easement to be able to use property or enter property that's not your own. Okay? Very important. You must know that. All right? You must know that. Let's look at some other terms that are associated with time immemorial. Okay? Some other terms that are associated with time immemorial. We have water rights, okay? Aboriginal titles, oral traditions, that's irrelevant. We see here, it says also see what? Acquiescence, okay? Acquiescence, we know what acquiescence means, but to make a claim. Legal fictions, key point. Prehistory, Royal Lives Clause, okay? That has to do with de ultimaris, what was it called? What was that legal term? De ultimaris, meaning those born abroad, okay? Very, very, very important. And in regards to time immemorial, you see the term here as legal fiction. Let's go up here to English land law. If you want to know about that, go visit my last lesson, okay? So we're dealing with time immemorial. Legal fiction, we know what legal fictions are. Very, very important. Now let's go to let's go here now. Kingdom of England. We talked about this in my last lecture. Okay, very important. You see our three lions. Godfrey, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. Okay, Godfrey, the fifth count of Anjou, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. This is his crest. This flag right here is irrelevant. Okay, that don't come to the what we call the 15th century. Okay, 16th century. The flag atop don't come to the 16th century. This banner down here in the royal arms goes back to the 12th century. Okay, that goes back to the time of what we call the Crusades. All right, so very, very important to understand what was it called, the oath of allegiance, because we understand a promise is a oath in regards to the land that was promised. Okay, so you're dealing with a promised land. You know what I'm saying? We're dealing with a oath. All right, a agreement, a contract that a certain uh time, at a certain time, a conveyance of some land will be granted to the heirs or successors from the actual grantor. Okay, and if you go back to the history dealing with the kingdom of Jerusalem and the kingdom of Israel, they were all under what we call a united monarchy, and a monarch means a king. Okay, when you're talking about a fiction, so if that's the case, then in order for that to become a reality in today's time, it must become a legal fiction. Okay, a legal fiction, something even though it's false, as accepted as in the eyes of law as a fact. All right, to create or to build a bridge between the literal text of the law, which does not breach the law or the literal text of what we call to create a bridge with the literal text of the law without breaking the letter of the actual law. So it's very important to understand that the kingdom of England, okay, or the monarchs of England, okay, it had a direct influence in the area in which we're talking about, which is southern Levant, in regards to what the people who are suffering from the conflict and the Gaza Strip, i.e., Israel and Palestinian, don't know. And as a result of that, they're suffering as promised from their God, because that God was not a God of peace. That God was a God of war, versus the promise from that God who was promised the land to the what we call the ancient Canaanites or the ancient Israelites or the ancient Judahites, which are all one family. Okay, not going by those names today. The name has changed. Okay, very important. The name has in fact changed. Okay, let's look at it. The Kingdom of England was a sovereign state in the island of Great Britain from the 10th century, when it was unified by various Anglo-Saxon tribes. This was done by Alfred the Great. It was called the Heptarchy. Okay, he unified all the kingdoms. These kingdoms were known as the Byzantine kingdoms. Okay, going all the way back to us living in different tribes on different continents: North America, Europe, Africa, before we were invaded by what we call Arabs, known as Palestinians today. That's what other groups. No disrespect to you, you know what I'm saying? But the evidence is here. I can support it. We're talking about the area of Levant, which was the land of Jerusalem, going back to the ancient Canaanites, which was the kingdom of Jerusalem, and the kingdom of Judah, which were under the united monarchy. But as a result of the conquest of Levant, which led to the conquest of the Maghreb, which led to the conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, which led to the conquest of what we call Albion or England, okay? Now called Great Britain or United Kingdom. Very important to understand how your king comes to this conclusion, all right? Let's look at it. This is time immemorial right here. All right, we're talking about before time immemorial, okay? When it was just a tradition, custom, now it becomes law. It's our ancestors saw fit to put this in law, all right? So that the transfer of property can transfer by what we call operation of law. Beginning in the year 886, Alfred the Great reoccupied London from the Danish Vikings, and after this event declared himself king of what? The Anglo-Saxon Berbers. We are, in fact, Berbers. I didn't say it, the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica says it, okay? The Anglo-Saxon Berbers, which were kingdoms unified by Alfred the Great, all right? His descendants, Edward the Elder, Asutan, they made their way onto the last king, Edward the Confessor, before the Norman conquest, right here by William the Conqueror, okay? William the Conqueror brought in the English kings. Prior to that, the only kings in those territories were Berber kings, because they were on all 4 continents. Norman conquest tends to led to a transfer of the English capital and chief royalties of the residents of the Anglo-Saxon at Winchester to Westminster, until the city of London quickly established itself as the English largest as the English largest and principal commercial center. Okay, we're talking from 886, or we should say 927, his great great grandson Asher's son. All right, to 1066. Okay, that's when William the Conqueror invaded England. All right, when William the Conqueror invaded England, he still kept up our laws. Okay, how we know that? Because he transferred all the land based upon that promise to the Plantagenet king Fulk V as a result of a royal marriage between Empress Matilda and Godfrey V, kind of man Jew. Okay, that goes into this, goes into here. History of the Kingdom of England from the Norman Conquest to 1066, conventionally distinguished periods named after successive ruling dynasties. All right, so this is a unified monarchy, ruling dynasties from the Normans to the Angevins to the Plantagenets, then to the de facto Tudors, then to the Stuarts. All right, until what we got, until up to what we call the colonies and to the present day states. Okay, it's all right here in front of you. Okay, it's all, but you can't understand it if you don't understand the past. So let's understand the past first. Okay, very important. Let's go back to the kingdom, history of ancient Israel and ancient Judah. Let's go here. History of ancient Israel and Judah. Okay, all are part of the kingdom of Jerusalem. Okay, right here. History of the ancient Israel of Judah, southern Levant, okay, southern Levant, okay, northern and southern part of Levant, okay. The history of the ancient Israel and Judah spans from the early appearances of the Israelites in Canaan, okay, hill country during the late second millennium BCE, all right. We know that BC it stands for Berber calendar era. That's what's known to us, not before Christ. To the establishment of subsequent downfall of the two Israelite kingdoms in the mid-first millennium BCE. This history unfolds within southern Levant during the Iron Age. We know the Iron Age king or monarch at that time was, or God at that time was called Yahweh because they called themselves lords. Kings at that time called themselves lords. Very, very, very important. Let's look at the map. All right, look. See the map. Kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel. Okay, right here. Judah and Israel. Okay, the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel. Okay. Kingdom of Judah and Israel. The history of ancient Israel and Judah spans from the early appearance of the Israelites in Canaan Hill country during the late second millennium BCE. All right. Second millennium, Iron Age and Bronze Age. Let's read a little bit more. Here. According to the Hebrew Bible, a united monarchy consisted of Israel and Judah existing as early as the 11th century BC, under the reign of Saul, David, and Solomon. Three kings, okay? One king transferred to the next king, to the next king. That's called the demise of the crown, okay? This is called the demise of the crown. The great kingdoms later were separated into two smaller kingdoms. Israel containing the cities of Shechem and Samaria, and the north and Judah containing Jerusalem and Solomon's temple. And the South, the historicity of the United Monarchy is debated, and there is no archaeological remains of it that are accepted as consensus by historical and archaeologists, archaeological lists, archaeologists agree that Israel and Judah existed as a separate kingdom by the 9th 900 BCE. Okay, very, very, very important. Okay, that's in regards to the history and ancient Israel and Judah. It was a united monarchy. It had a king. All right, especially when you talk about the kingdom of Israel. Okay, especially when you're talking about the kingdom of Israel. Okay, you can't look at it from the fiction. You have to look at it from a legal fiction. Legal fiction is something that's false, but it's something as a fact based upon the legal purposes of the promise for the promised land, based upon what's supposed to be conveyed. So someone who's supposed to promise promised land to you had to set up some type of conveyance, which is through operation of law, going back to time immemorial, time Adamine, and make that applicable today. In order for that to happen, there must be some existent law to facilitate that promise based upon the conveyance from the original grantor, which have to be identified as God or Lord or King. Okay? The kingdom of Israel, we're talking about the kingdom of Judah or kingdom of Israelites, which is all one kingdom going all back to the ancient Canaanites, all right, was an Israelite kingdom that may have existed. And back again, southern Levant. Why is always that area? The first, and we know Levant means rising. The first extra biblical mention of Israel dated from the Merneptah stela created by Pharaoh Merneptah, if I'm pronouncing wrong, please forgive me, in 1208 BC. And this Pharaoh was a Berber. He wasn't an Egyptian, he was a Berber, according to the Deuteronomistic history of the Hebrew Bible. Very, 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 very important when we're talking about the Deuteronomistic history of the Hebrew Bible. We're talking about Deuteronomy. I said the Deuteronomistic history of the Hebrew Bible, the United Kingdom of Israel or the United Monarchy, existed under the reign of Saul, Ishbosheth, David, and Solomon, encompassing the territories of both later kingdoms of Judah and Israel. Okay, so if that is in fact the case, let's go and see what Deuteronomy say about the same thing. Okay, in regard to the promised land, that the descendants who are known by a different name in present day were supposed to have been inheriting based upon the promise from God. Okay, they're not more than trustees. Okay, so if you're a trustee, then you're not the beneficiary. The heirs or successors are the beneficiary, and apparently that promise of the conveyance to the beneficiary, which are heirs and successors, is not those people over there on what we call Israel or Judah today. Okay, all right, very important to understand that. That brings me here. Promise. Promise. A promise is an oath. An oath is an agreement. An agreement is a compact. Okay. So every nation make oath. Every nation makes agreement. Every nation makes compact. Okay. Every Nation, when we talk about nation of people, we're not every nation of people. We're one nation. Our nation is called the English. Okay, so we can only interpret the promise based upon the land, based upon the English story, because he who writes your books sets your timeline, especially when you're talking about a concept such as time immemorial. Okay, such as time immemorial. Let's look at it. We're looking at the origin. We know what an oath means, but let's look at the origin, as they say, according to our story. Okay. Behind me, that's King Edgar the Peaceful, which looks directly like me. Okay. It looks directly like me. We know incarnation is called personification, and we know personification of an incarnation based upon the promise of the one who you're incarnating from had to be created through a legal fiction, which created a bridge between the literal text of the law passed by that king that are still applicable in the present day. Okay. The oath of allegiance was performed to who? King Edgar. Edgar means rich in spirit, which means rich in descendants. In 944, okay, this was also continued by his predecessors, parts of his successors, going all the way back to John, the one who signed the Magna Carta. The oath was certainly in use at the date of John, King of England, the Magna Carta, signed by on the 15th of June, 1215. This is well into what we call the Crusade Wars, okay? King Edgar, which is to us is Jesus Christ, okay? This is our Jesus Christ, King Edgar. I'm not saying it based upon what Wikipedia said. And we're going to take our cue from Mark Weiner, who wrote a book on the root of the clan, okay? Let's look at what Mark Weiner has to say about Jesus Christ. From king to king. Book from root of the clan was an ancient from a social what an ancient form of social organization reveals about the future of individual freedom. Okay, root of the clan by Mark Weiner. Matter of fact, let me show you the cover. Get this book, y'all. This is a lawyer, okay, who studied common law. A lawyer, brothers and sisters. Okay, so don't take my word for it. Take his word for it. We know the Anglo-Saxons were converted to Christianity by who? Pope Gregory the first. We know the calendar that you go by is created by Pope Gregory the 13th, called the Gregorian calendar. We don't go by that calendar. We go by the Berber calendar, which is the year 2975, which is the year for the Berbers. Okay, this was the calendar was there before the English calendar came in with William the Conqueror. Okay, let's look what this book has to say. From kin to a king. Okay, from kin to a king. State development of the Anglo-Saxons, okay, in England. In 973, in the Abbey in Bath, a great Anglo-Saxon king lay prostrate before an altar while the Archbishop of Canterbury wept with joy. This king was Edgar the first, known as Edgar the Peaceful, not Yahweh. Yahweh was a lord or a god or a king of war. And at 30, he was in the 14th year of his exceedingly successful reign. Under his rule, England revamped its currency, streamlined its central administration, sustained its military authority over a once restive Islam, and recognized its counties, hundreds, shires, along lines that will remain consistently unchanged until 1974. I was born in 1970. The Archbishop was Dunstan, a determined reformer of the English church and advocate for its monistic interests. Overcome by the king's humility, he sang to him to doom through his tears. We praise thee, O God. Did y'all hear that? Did y'all hear that? Overcome by king's humility, he sang to him to doom through his tears. We praise thee, O God. We acknowledge thee to be the Lord. A half century later, he will be canonized as a saint. The occasion for Edgar's pious self-effacement and Dunstan's joy was that the king's coronation. Tellingly, the ceremony was held on Pentecost when the Christians celebrated the descent of the Holy Spirit on the apostles. The age of the king too was significant. The same at which Jesus began his ministry. The ritual began when Edgar, wearing a crown, holding a scepter, was led into the abbey by a parade of white-robed clerics, a crowd of priests. In the words of the Anglo-Saxon chronicles, a throng of monks and council says the ensuing ceremony was filled with all the pageantry of the great royal events in England today. The king would be anointed with the holy oil from an animal's horn. He would be given a ring, a sword, a crown, a scepter, a staff as a symbol of his rule. And the abbey would resound with the joyous anthem from first King Zodok, the priest of the Nathan the prophet. Did y'all hear that, brothers and sisters? Did y'all hear that? But in constitutional terms, the most important part of the ritual came when Edgar spoke. Shortly after, clerics raised him from his position of humility before the altar, for it was then that he swore his coronation oath, making a public promise. Hear that? Y'all don't hear me. Y'all don't hear me. Made a public promise. Remember, promise means oath. Oath origin goes back to King Edgar, and we're hearing the oath or the promise that he made on behalf of who he was making an oath or promise to in regards to the land, him being Zodok priest, the king of the what we call king of priests. And we know what we see in Syria Club versus Morden. It said a king or a priest is a corporation soul. So if Zodok is a priest and a king is Zodok, that meant that they are one and the same. His word have echo as loudly across constitutional halls. You hear that? Because that constitutional terms is a language that they use, okay? It said they're across constitutional history as the anthem Zodok the priest echoed in the Abbey of Bath that day. In the name of what? The Holy Trinity, I promise three things to the Christian people, my subjects. He declared, first, that God's church and all Christian people of my realm shall enjoy true peace. Second, that I forbid all ranks of men, robbery, and all wrongful deeds. Third, that I urge and command justice and mercy in all judgment, so that the gracious and compassionate God who lives and reigns may grant us his everlasting mercy. In modern terms, a king had pledged to protect the church, to safeguard public order by applying the law to all persons regardless of rank, and to govern according to an abstract, not concrete, y'all, an abstract Christian idea of justice. Edgar pledged in the first coronation oath in the Anglo-Saxon historical record, and through it may not have been the earliest ever taken by an English king. It clearly marks an Anglo-Saxon government as having come a long way from its roots and a very different way of life. What are the preconditions for the modern clan society to develop to the rule of law? What are the fruits of that transformation? The English Middle Ages, the story of leading to Edgar's coronation, oath, and beyond offers what? Important clues. Why? Because the only clues we got is the clues we're about to go to now. Let's see what Mark 1 says, that we have made you into nations, okay? From tribes into nations, okay? Let's see. When missionaries sent Pope Gregory to convert the Anglo-Saxons landed, when missionaries sent Pope Gregory to convert the Anglo-Saxons landed in Kent in 597. You hear that? The Anglo-Saxons landed in Kent in 597, and the young merchant who would become the prophet of Islam was a recently married man. Born around 570, Muhammad had spent his early life as a shepherd and occasion trader, gained a reputation for the honesty that earned him the nickname Al-Amin, the trustworthy. In 593, he wedded a prosperous businesswoman named Khadija, who had hired him to lead a trade caravan to Syria and Yemen. When Muhammad began to receive revelations from Archangel Gabriel around 610, revelation later collected as the Quran, Khadija became the first person other than Muhammad himself to accept the new faith of Islam. At that point, listen very closely, y'all. Listen. At that point, Anglo-Saxon Christianity too was in its relatively infancy. following the death in 16 of the first Christian Anglo-Saxon ruler, King Ethelbert of Kent. Many of his subjects quickly reverted to what? Paganism. Thereafter, six signposts of religious development in England and Arabia appear on the timeline of history and striking parallel. Did you hear that? Striking parallel. We're talking about the conflict we're having today, dealing with the Israel Palestinian, or what we call the Arab and what we call Canaan. All that is a story that are stories told about people who are not the original people in those stories. The original people in those stories are the English, okay? The English, when we go to 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, which I'm going to go to right after this, proves that in spite of their Mohammedan ways, their government was written and their unquoted law was called the Magna Carta, okay? Because we know that we were, through invasion, we were indoctrinated with the religion of Islam, okay? Which we know our king was called King Edgar the Peaceful, okay? Which is the reason why we go into the wars in that area called Jerusalem, Canaan, Israel, Judah, okay? All that story goes back into the inhabitants who inhabited that land, okay? We know that they had an exodus in that land as well, based upon the storyline that's told by those narratives, okay? So it says here that thereafter, six posts of religious development in England and Arabia appear at the same timeline and striking parallel. Okay, check it out. In 622, Muhammad settled in Medina, migrating from Mecca to escape persecution by tribal elites. The momentous Hijra, if I pronounce it wrong, marked the first year of the Islamic calendar, where the English was already here. Okay, in 625, the pagan king Regwall of East Anglia was buried in Sutton Hole with two silver spoons bearing the inscription of Saul and Paul and indicating the growing influence of Christianity. Not Muhammad, but King Regwall of East Anglia, which came up under the unification of the through Alfred the Great by unifying the Heptarchy into what we call the kings of Wessex. Okay, and one of these kings, when they were of Kent, okay, as we can see, had a spoon with the inscription of Saul and Paul, indicating the growing influence of Christianity. All right, very, 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 very important. In 627, the powerful Northumbrian King Edwin was baptized. In 630, Muhammad returned to Mecca in triumph. In 632, Abu Bakr succeeded Muhammad as his first Khalifa, and that's when you get into what we call the conquest of the Levant. Okay, the conquest of the Levant. Before we get to that, let me bring you here about these spoons, okay? About these spoons that King Regwall had in his mouth. They're called apostles' spoons. How many of you heard of that? How many of you heard of that? An apostle spoon, so I'm sharing it. An apostle spoon is a spoon usually silver or silver plated, but sometimes of other metals, such as a pewter, with the image of an apostle or other saint at the terminal of the handle, each bearing his distinctive emblem. Apostle spoons were particularly popular prior to the reformation of the English church. How many know about that? Okay, oh, that's another reformation, the Protestant Reformation. I think that might be the same thing, but I'm not going to click and find that out. To symbolize the Last Supper of Christ and the company of his apostles. Apostle spoons were especially popular in England. You hear that? In England, not in Jerusalem, brothers and sisters, not in Judah, not in Canaan, but in England. But were also found in large numbers in what we call Germany. We must comprehend what's going on. Let's look at it. Origin. Originating in the early 15th century in Europe as spoons used at tables often reduced in sets of 13, The 13 showing Jesus usually being referred to as the savior or the master spoon. The British Museum in London has a set from England dating from the 1536 to 1537, which had a figure of the Virgin Mary on the 13th spoon. By the 16th century, they have become popular as baptismal presents for godchildren, but were dying out by the 16th century. In some communities, this tradition continued until at least the mid 20th century. Okay, very, very, very important to understand the oath of allegiance. Okay, in regards to the origin, which goes back to King Edgar the Peaceful, which was in fact Jesus Christ, as Mark Miner said it in his book. Okay, very, very important. This was Jesus Christ in the flesh. All right, let's get it. So we know that Mark Weiner said, and I'll just go back there. He said in 630, Muhammad returns to Mecca in triumph, and in 632, Abu Bakr succeeded Muhammad as the first Caliph. Okay, so let's go to the conquest of Levant, and let's see who are the belligerents in this conflict. First, let's read Deuteronomy, because we know that the history of Israel was based upon a Deuteronomistic belief. Okay, all right, Deuteronomistic belief. And we know Deuteronomy is a book in regards to the belief. Okay, of the kingdom, the descendants who were known as the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel, which were under a unified monarchy. Okay, very, very, very important. All right, let's see here. Deuteronomy 17. Do not sacrifice to the Lord your God an ox or sheep that has any defect or flaw in it, for that will be detestable against him. If a man or woman living amongst you in one town, the Lord gives you, in one of the towns, the Lord gives you, is found doing evil in the eyes of the Lord your God in violation of his covenant, promise, agreement, and contrary to my command has worshipped other gods, bowing down to them, or the sun or the moon or the stars in the sky, and this has been brought to your attention, then you must investigate it thoroughly. If it is true and it has been proven that this detestable thing has been done in Israel, take the man or woman who has done this evil deed to your city gate and stone that person to death. On the testimony of two or three witnesses, a person is to be put to death, but no one is to be put to death on the testimony of only one witness. The hands of the witness must be the first in putting the person to death, and then the hands of all the people. And then the hands of all the people. You must purge the evil from amongst you. Okay. Law of the court. This is the focal point right here. All right. This is the focal point. This one and the one I'm about to read. The king. Remember I said, he will write your books, it's your timeline. Verse 8, if a case come before your court that are too difficult for you to judge, whether bloodshed, lawsuit, or assault, take them to the place the Lord your God will choose. Go to the Levitical priest and to the judge who is in the office at that time. Inquire of them, and they will give you the verdict. This is talking about due process of law. You must act according to the decision they give you at the place of the Lord will choose. Be careful to do everything they instruct you to do. This is mean follow instruction in regards to the steps you must take. All right, meaning that from trial court, all that thought, everyone. about that. So it said, if a case comes before your court that are too difficult for you to judge, whether bloodshed, lawsuit, or assault, take them to the place of your Lord God will choose. Go to the Levitical priest and to the judge who is in office at the time. Inquire of them, and they will give you the verdict. You must act according to the decision they give you at the place of the Lord will choose. Be careful to do everything they instruct you to do. Act according to whatever they teach you and decisions they give you. Do not turn aside from what they tell you, to the right or to the left. Anyone who shows contempt for the judge or the priest who stands ministering there to the Lord your God, who stands ministering there to the Lord your God, is to be put to death. You must purge the evil from Israel. Once again, we're purging the evil from Israel. All the people will hear and be afraid and will not be contentious again. Now it talks about the king. Very important. When you enter to the land your God is giving you and have taken possession of it and settle in it, and you say, let us set a king over us like all the nations around us. Be sure to appoint over you a king the Lord your God chooses. He must be from among your fellow Israelites. You hear what I'm saying? He must be from among your fellow Israelites. Do not place a foreigner over you, one who is over must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself or make the people return to Egypt to get more of them. For the Lord has told you, you are not to go back that way again. So as it was in the past, should not be in the future. Okay, nor the language of the past will not be the language of the future. It's a whole different language. Okay. He must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amount of silver or gold. Okay, this is very important to what I'm about to go now in regards to the purpose of the king, based upon the ancient Israelites or the ancient Judahites, which were all of one same people. All right, under a united monarchy. Okay, and the remedy for that promise to the Israelites in lieu of the promised land was based upon due process of law and lieu of the conveyance, starting from those who are under the control of what we call the land by way of what we call acquiescence, what we call prescription of sovereignty, all right, which is what you see over there in Israel today. They're fighting over land that they can't prove that it's theirs, okay? What they should be is in a court of law, trying to argue this matter out. Not out there throwing bombs, but we know Yahweh is the God of war, okay? So we don't choose that. That means that we ain't those people, and they're not the people of the ancient Israelites, because we read it here. He said, in order for that, you don't need to drop bombs. You don't need to be flying jets. You can go to court, okay, and sue. And the only person that can do that is the king, okay? Very, 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 very. He said, when he takes the throne of his kingdom and he writes for himself on his scroll a copy of this law, taken from the Levitical priest, meaning that these are the laws from old. They're silent laws, but they're silent, meaning that they can't be used because there's a gap in the history, there's a gap in the legislation, and there's a gap in the law. So a legal fiction linking back to time immemorial had to create a bridge between the literal text of the law without breaching the letter of the law, which letter of the law is those Levitical priests, which are now in this present day called judges. It is to be with him, and he is to read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to reverence the Lord his God and follow carefully all the words of this law. And he decrees and not consider himself better than his fellow Israelites, and turn from the law to the right or to the left. Then he and descendants will reign a long time over the kingdom of Israel. Did you hear that, my brothers and sisters? Okay, very important, because we're about to go ahead. Let's go to what, according to Mark Weiner, stated in regards to what we call the English history and the history of Islam came upon the scene in striking parallel. Okay, in striking parallel, and it goes into the apostles. Okay, having a spoon in this mouth, which was one of the kings of Kent, Rockwall, which were affiliated with the Anglo-Saxons, which were the kings of Wessex. Okay, very important. We know Muhammad, nor Abu Bakr were associated with them. Okay, not dishonoring Abu Bakr. All right, because let's go here right quick. Let me just prove. Let me go here. I'm not kicking shade on the Arabs. I'm just reading what's here. We know that the ancient Canaanites originated in where? From the Iron Age or the Bronze Age. The Berbers existed before the Iron Age or the Bronze Age. They go back to the Stone Age. It said that in spite of the history of conquest, so we didn't need the conquest, okay? Berbers didn't conquer or conquest, nor did they make maps, all right, or and things of that nature, because they were the indigenous people of that land. So it said, in spite of the history of foreign conquest, going all the way back to the Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, Vandals, Arabs, and French. The Berber physical type and the Berber temperament and nationality has what? Persisted to what? The Stone Age. So we predate what you are identifying as the ancient Canaanites, known as the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. We are the actual kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israelites, unified under a monarchy by one king under a different identity now, known as the Berbers, also known as Anglo-Saxons. Okay? Why? Because the government of the Anglo-Saxons and the government of the Berbers are one and the same. Yes, white people call themselves Anglo-Saxons. Nonetheless, we're not one and the same. I'm going to prove it because case law says it. Okay? Right here. The Arab has built his social structure on Quran, which inculcates absolutism, aristocracy, theocracy. The Berber, despite his nominal Mohammedanism, is a Democrat with his Jimna Witama in his Qanun, or unwritten code, the Magna Carta, of the individual liberties as opposed to the community's good. Okay? So the government of Witama and the Magna Carta uncoded. Before it was written, it was uncoded, and the government was called Witama, which was called Wise Council. These wise councils were those apostles that followed Jesus, and this Jesus was King Edward the Peaceful, which goes all the way back to the reason why the what we call the Kingdom of Jerusalem and that whole story ever came about, which I'm gonna prove in a second. Okay, very, very, very important to understand that. Where was I going to go right now? Where was I going? Oh yeah, this is where I'm going. Okay, okay. So we're talking about Berbers, but the government of the Anglo-Saxons, and the codes of law called the Magna Carta. That is the law of the Anglo-Saxons. Okay, so if that is in fact the case, let's look what the Supreme Court has to say. Anyway, Mahatan, this is district court. Okay, it says right here. To summarize the approach which we must follow in deciding whether a particular person applying for citizenship, applying for citizenship is a white person within the meaning of the status as interpreted by the Supreme Court. It is necessary to determine first what particular group or racial subdivision to which the individual belongs as a white person. And practical effects, proof of this fact is a matter of what? Genealogy. White is the color of skin. It's not an ethnicity or genealogy, okay? An individual who presents an aberration from the color of their skin of the group of which he claims he is a member, such as a light-skinned Chinese or Japanese or a dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, does not thereby acquire a different status under an act from other members of his group. Of course, when an individual applying for citizenship has a skin of a different color, then it's usual for the member of the group from which he claims to be a strong burden of proof then rests upon him to show by usual methods of proving genealogy that he is in fact a member of that group. Okay, after an individual has traced into his group, then the second question comes. Second question the court must answer is whether the member of that group as a whole or white person as Congress understood it and in terms of the Nationalistic Act of 1790 when they first enacted that statute. And to decide the latter question in regards to the Nationalistic Act of 1790, the test is not how a group in question will be classified by ethnologists, which have made a strong study of a racial origin, but rather what group of people then living in 1790 with the characteristics then existing were intended by Congress to be classified as white person. Applying this principle, the court finds that petitioner is an Arab and that Arabs are not white persons within the meaning of the act. We're talking about Arabs, okay? We're talking about Palestinians, and we're talking about citizenship, not over there in what we call Canaan or Israel or Palestine. We're talking about them here. They're not talking about ethnicity or genealogy test. They're talking about the color of skin versus a ethnicity test and a genealogy test, which deals with Anglo-Saxons who also have dark skin, as they said, okay, who are in fact American citizens. How I know United States versus Sing-Tu or United States versus Sing-Tuk or Do, okay? Let's look at this case. It says here, must an American citizen seeking to return to his native land be compelled to bring with him 2 witnesses to prove the place of his birth, or else be denied his right to return and all opportunities of establishing his citizenship in the court of his country? We're talking about courts, right? Courts that are in the country, okay? Establish himself in the courts in the country. Right. Yeah, and all opportunity of establishing citizenship in the court of its country. No such rule is enforced against an American citizen of Anglo-Saxon descent. And if this be as claimed a government of law and not a man, I do not think it should be enforced against Anglo-American citizens of Chinese descent. That's different than what they just said in Ray of Mahassan, okay? They said the meaning of the National Act of 1790 in regards to the meaning of citizenship in reference to the language of that statute had nothing to do with a ethnicity or genealogy test in regards to proving citizenship here, like a dark-skinned Anglo-Saxon, which are clearly the American citizen, as stated here. Okay, so this is an argument that we cannot lose. Okay, and with that, we'll go here. Okay, based upon what Mark Warner said about Muhammad's descendant Abu Bakr in regards to the ancient city of Levant, okay, of Levant, and that was the claimed to be the territory inhabited by the ancient Israel or Judah, which were all of the same people under a unified monarchy, i.e., a king. All right, and based upon a promised land, okay, a promised land. Muslim conquest of Levant, or Arab conquest of Syria, was a 634 to 638 Circuit era conquest of the Byzantine Syria by Rashidun Khalifa. Okay, Rashidun Khalifa. Who are some of the belligerents? Let's look at it. Rashidun Khalifa, all right, very important. And the Byzantine Empire, okay? The Byzantine Empire. Commanders and leaders were Abu Bakr, as mentioned in the book, all right, and Heraclius, okay? And Heraclius, okay? So this is the Muslim conquest of Levant, okay? Of Levant. This goes back to what area? 634 and 638, okay? Very important. Okay, the next invasion, all right, and it's between the Arabs and the Byzantine War. So the Arabs are not Byzantines, and the Byzantine Empire are not the empire of the Arabs. What I'm telling you that the Byzantine Empire was the English Empire. That's what I'm telling you, okay? Why? Let's go here. The Muslim conquest of the Maghreb. Because the Muslim conquest of the Maghreb happened after the Muslim conquest of Levant, okay? And the Maghreb are not Arabs. The Maghreb are composed of Berbers, okay? And keep in mind what the 1911 encyclopedia said about Arabs and Berbers. Even though the Berbers have Mohammedans in ways, they're in fact the Anglo-Saxons, as well as the custom of law was that of the Magna Carta. Okay? The conquest agreed by the Rashidun, the same person who invaded Levant, was of the Umayyad Khalifa, which is the Ottoman Empire, okay, who were commenced in 647 and concluded in 709 when the Byzantine Empire lost its last remaining stronghold to Khalifa al-Walid I. North African campaigns were part of the century of rapid early Muslim conquest. So you didn't own it, all right? You conquered the land. You invaded the land. You made those who were on the land slaves. From the conquest of Levant to the conquest of the Maghreb, on to the conquest of the Iberian Peninsula. Let's go back here. Conquest of the Maghreb. Let's look at the belligerents. Rashidun and Abu Bukhari invaded or conquered through conquest Levant. Then they moved to the Maghreb, okay, under Rashidun Khalifa against the Byzantine Empire, which were what? Berbers. These were Berbers, okay? These were Berbers. The kingdom of Altaba, Christian Berbers. Kingdom of Ores, Christian Berbers. Kabyle Confederation, Berbers. Kingdom of Orsinus, Berbers. Kingdom of Habdana, Berbers. Various and other Berber tribes, okay? So we are not Arabs, we're not Muslims, we are Berbers, okay? We are descendants of the ancient Canaanites who followed Christ, which was King Edgar the Peaceful. I'm proving in a second. Once you invaded or conquered Iberia, then you went on to what we call, Iberia. Let's go to Iberia now. Okay, these are where the Spanish comes in. Okay, they were controlled by the kings of Castile before they converted to Roman Catholic Christianity. Okay, like they converted the Anglo-Saxon to Roman Catholic Christianity. We had our own form of Christianity because we know the Dunes book was the code that Alfred the Great encoded that was of the laws created by Moses called the Mosaic Code, brothers and sisters. Let's look at it. Muslim conquest of the Iberian Peninsula after they conquered the Maghreb and what we call Levant, southern Levant. Okay, let's look at the. I ain't got time to go into the whole specifics, but just look at the parties: the Umayyad Caliphs and the Visigoth Kingdom, which was the Byzantine Empire. The Kingdom of Austria. These are Spanish kings. Okay, very, very, very important. Okay, now let's look at the Muslim conquest of Jerusalem. This goes into what we call Saladin. I mean, not Saladin because that don't come into the Crusade War. But the first Muslim conquest of Jerusalem goes back into a conquest of Jerusalem, Muslim conquest of Levant. So the conquest of Levant or the conquest of Jerusalem are the same thing. The Muslims were not the original people of Levant or Jerusalem, now called Israel or Palestine, which was the kingdom of Judah. All right. All the identity that you now have goes back to the invasions under Abu Bakr and Rashidun that goes back to what we call the Ottoman Empire. Okay. Very, 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 very important. All right. Very, very important. The Muslim conquest of the city solidified Arabs' control over Palestine, which are now called Palestinians, which is the main part of the various Sunni caliphs until the Shiite-led Fatima caliphs took over in 969. And in 1073, the Seljuk Turks took control of Jerusalem and Christian rulers regained control at the time of the First Crusade in 1099. Now we're up to the Crusades, my brothers and sisters. So let's go to the Crusades. First Crusades. Now, this is how you teach. This is how you teach, brothers and sisters. This reveals who Christ is. And it's who I said it was. King Edgar, the Peaceful, was on the reincarnation of. The First Crusade from 1096 to 1099 was first and most successful of the series of religious wars or crusades which were initiated, supported at the time, directed by the Latin Church in the Middle Ages. Their aim was to return the Holy Land, which had been conquered by who? Rashidun Caliphs in the 7th century to the Christian rule, and the Christian were the Byzantine Empire, which were burghers. Okay? Very, 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 very important. This is in 1096, okay? Army of Godfrey of Bouillon, who was the king of Jerusalem, or that brings us to the kingdom of Jerusalem during the first crusades. Let's look at that. The kingdom of Jerusalem, also known as the Crusader Kingdom, was one of the Crusader states established in Levant immediately after the First Crusade. We're talking about Levant again. Hold that thought. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, also known as the Crusader Kingdom, was one of the Crusader states established in Levant immediately after the First Crusade. Okay, it lasted for almost 200 years from the ascension of Godfrey of Bouillon. Godfrey of Bouillon were from the house of Eblin. Okay, all right, from which goes back to Eblin Castle, which was built by Fulk V, the father of Godfrey, the ruler of Jerusalem. Okay, the Eblin Castle was built by Fulk V, where Godfrey of Bouillon descended down from, which his father was Eustace II. Okay, who assisted William the Conqueror to overthrow England, I might add. Okay, to Crusader state. The first king was who? Godfrey of Bouillon, who never wore a crown because the crown, and this goes into the history of Saladin. Okay? Let's go back to the history of Saladin. Watch that movie. Belian was the son of Godfrey. Okay? Godfrey of Eblin. Okay? Very, very important. The original kingdom of Jerusalem lasted from 1099 to 1187 before being almost entirely overran by the Ayyubid Sultan under Saladin. Time immemorial goes back to 1189. This is 1187. So in regards to making connection to anything is this before 1189, you have to use the concept of time immemorial, okay? Because that's when it went from memory to becoming law, okay? Having a legal claim to the kingdom of Jerusalem, okay? Very important. First king was who? Godfrey of Bouillon. Very, very, very important. We know who Godfrey of Bouillon is. Okay? Very important to know who Godfrey of Bouillon. Let's see. Godfrey of Bouillon. Check it out. King don't play. I know who all these people are. My family. If you claim to be King Yahweh, you better know this family line. Because a person in North America came to be Yahweh, the king of the Canaanites. Okay? Which I'm going to show you today. Godfrey of Bouillon was the preeminent leader of the first crusade and the first ruler of what? The kingdom of Jerusalem. All right? The kingdom of Jerusalem from 1099 to 1100 AD, Annos Dominios, in the year of our Lord. Although initially reluctant to take the title of king. You hear that? You see how important that title is? He agreed to rule as prince under the title Advocatus Sancti Sepulchri, or advocate of the Holy Sepulchre. Okay? Of the Holy Sepulchre. He didn't take king because he knew who the true king or Christ was. That was King Edgar the Peaceful. Why? Because his son was married to Jesus Christ's great-granddaughter. Okay? Great-granddaughter, Goda of England. Okay? Godfrey of Bouillon, father Eustace II, was married to Godfrey Goda of England. Okay? Who is Eustace II? Who was the father of the king of Jerusalem, who didn't take the title king but prince. Eustace II was Count of Boulogne from 1049 to 1087. He fought with the Norman side at the Battle of Hastings, okay? And afterward received large grants of land from forming the honor of Boulogne, in England. He was one of the few prominent companions of who? William the Conqueror. His second son, Godfrey of Bouillon. You hear that? So Eustace's second son was Godfrey of Bouillon, okay? His second son, Godfrey of Bouillon, was a preeminent leader of the First Crusade and the first ruler of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Who was his wife? Godfrey of Bouillon, Eustace's second wife, he was the father of Godfrey of Bouillon, the Prince of Jerusalem. He married Goda of England. Okay, he had two wives, Ala Lorraine and Goda of England. Who is Goda of England? Let's look at it. Or God Gifted. Goda of England, or God Gifted Godi, 1004 AD to 1049 to 1056 AD, Annos Dominios, was the daughter of King Ethelred the Unready and his second wife, Emma of Normandy, and the sister of King Edward the Confessor. She married firstly Drogo of Mantes, Count of Vexin, probably on 7th of April 2024, and had a son by him. So we see Gold of England was the daughter of who? King Ethelred the Unready. Who is King Ethelred the Unready? Let's look him up. It's our family. King Ethelred the Unready, later known as King Ethelred II, later known as Ethelred the Unready, was the king of the English from 978 to 1013, and again from 1014 until his death 1016. His epithet, Old English Unready, poorly advised, played in an Ethelred, is a play on Ethelred's well advisement, meaning what he was ill advised. Ethelred was the son of King Edgar and King Elspeth. Okay, he came to the throne about age 12, following the assassination of his elder half brother King Edward the Martyr. So Ethelred the Unready, who was the daughter was Goda of England, who was married to Eustace of Boulogne, who was the father of Godfrey of Bouillon, king of Jerusalem, was the son of King Edgar the Peaceful, which, as they said in Mark Warner's book, was in fact Jesus Christ. Go back to it. From king to king. Okay. Edgar, he was the king. He was Melchizedek. He was God on earth. Okay. Right here. Zodok priest. So that goes all the way back to ancient Canaan. Okay. With the unified monarchy with Solomon building the second temple. The only thing that needs to be built now is the third temple, which they claim to be built in Jerusalem, but it has not been built. As you can see, we are called the Third Temple English Church, Heirs and Successors. That is the name of our civil and religious corporate body existing as what we call the crown, which is a corporation soul. Okay, very, very, very important. Okay, and why do I say this? Okay, why do I say this? Let's see here. When we look at Levant, we see a Levant company was established by who? Queen Elizabeth I from the House of Lancaster, daughter of King Henry VIII, son of King Henry VII, who conquered the Lancaster branch by overthrowing it, which was the cadet branch of the Plantagenet crown. We see here, the Levant Company was an English chartered company from 1592 under Elizabeth I, daughter of daughter of Henry VIII, who was married to what's her name? What we call Queen Isabella of Castile, and her husband Ferdinand died. Henry VIII's wife, was the daughter of Queen Isabella of Spain, okay, which were Roman Catholics, I might add. So if you go to the Levant Company under Elizabeth I, de facto Queen of England, okay, she had what we call the Venice Company and the Turkish Company, okay, which was the Ottoman Company going all the way back to the Ottoman Empire. Merged because their charters had expired as she was eager to maintain trade and political alliance with the Ottoman Empire. Okay, so the Levant Company is a body that dealt with trade, a corporation, a company that dealt with trade that was affiliated with the Ottoman Empire, going all the way back to the old alliance. Okay, because the House of Tudors gave the House of Stuarts their start. Okay, so when we go back to the First Crusades, Wars, when we go back to that, First Crusade Wars, all that was based upon the territory known as the Holy Land and Levant, okay, which was overthrown by Arabs going back to not just Muhammad, but his successors, which was the Ottoman Empire under under the so-called Sultan Rulemed, Abubakari, and the rest of them, okay? Very important, right here, Ottoman Empire. Everyone see that. So why is this important? Because we know the First Crusade was to return the Holy Land from Saladin, okay? Then we get into the Ninth Crusade, which was the last crusade, was called the Crusade of Edward Lorsing, okay? The Crusade of Edward Lorsing. That was Edward the First, king of the Plantagenet crown, son of Henry III, son of John, son of Henry II, son of Godfrey the Fifth, kind of son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. Okay? We must understand how important this language is. Where am I at? So we have the First Crusade, and then we have the last one. It's called Lord Edward's Crusade. To the Holy Land, based upon the narrative. Okay? Because we know the Kingdom of England was right here in North America. Okay? We know the English Empire, which was within the continent of North America. So if Edward was joining the crusade, it was from here, North America, that he was given an assistance to what's going on directly across the Atlantic coast. All right? Very important. Not over in the UK. Lord Edward's Crusade, sometimes called the Ninth Crusade, was a military expedition to what? The Holy Land under the command of Edward Longshanks, later called King of England in 1271 and 1272. His practice in the extension of the Eighth Crusade, which was Louis of France, because it was related by what? Marriage. It was the last of the crusade before what? The fall of Acres in 1291. Very, very, very important. Very important. Why do I say this? Edward and his brother Edmund prepared an expedition to join Louis of Tunis. Hear that? Tunis. We know 1911 Peter Britannicus said, whatever is in Tunis, Tripoli, Algeria, that's not Arab, it's Berber. Okay? So we're not talking about Arabs because, one second. Okay. So Edward and his brother Edmund prepared an expedition to join Louis at Tunis, but it was delayed several times in the summer of 1270 because of their father, King Henry III of England, could not make up his mind whether to join it or not. On the advice of his counselors, Britain, he opted to stay in England, and the Crusaders embarked at Dover on the 20th of August. Unusual for the time, they were accompanied by Edward's wife, Eleanor of Castile. You hear that? Spain, y'all. Eleanor of Castile. We ain't talking about Queen Isabella of Castile because she was a Roman Catholic. Eleanor of Castile was those part of the Byzantine Empire living on the Iberian Peninsula, fighting against invasion of those who were not the indigenous people of that land, which were Arabs. Okay. There is some debate around the place and month of departure, Portsmouth or Dover, August or September. Dover is certainly more likely the month less, a month less so. Right here. Operation the Holy Land. Okay. Operation Holy Land. Listen, y'all, your king knows his stuff. Edward arrived at Acres while it was still under siege. His rival caused Belbar to change his plans and turn away from Acres. In the meantime, Edward discovered that the Venetians had a flourished trade with the Mamelukes, providing the latter with timber and metal needed for armaments. In addition, they controlled the slave trade along the Genesee. That's where you get that flag, St. George. Okay, that's called St. George's flag. Everyone need to understand. That's right. St. George flag, right there. Okay. Edward arrived in Acres while it was still under siege. He arrival caused Belbars to change his plans to turn away from Acres. In the meantime, Edward discovered that the Venetians had a flourished trade with Mamelukes, providing the latter with timber and metal needed for armaments. In addition, they controlled the slave trade along with the Genesese, in which they carried Turkish and Tatar slaves from Black Sea ports to Egypt. However, he could not prevent such business as they had license from the High Court at Acres. Crusaders raised. Listen, y'all. Listen. So the Venetians, that's what they said, right? That goes back to the Levant Company, which is based upon the Levidians, the Venetians. Right here. End of the crusade. Following this victory, Edward realized that to create a force capable of retaking Jerusalem, it would be necessary to end the internal unrest with the Christian states, and so he mediated between Hugh and enthusiastic knights from the Evelyn family of Cyprus. Okay, the Evelyn family, which Godfrey of Bouillon and Eustace of Boulogne were. They were of the Evelyn family. Let's just look at that real quick. The Evelyn family. From the house of Evelyn. The house of Evelyn was a noble family of the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem in the 12th century. They rose from relatively humble beginnings to become one of the most important families in the kingdom, holding various high offices with extensive holdings in the Holy Land in Cyprus. The family disappeared after the fall of the kingdom of Cyprus in the 15th century. The family took their name from the castle of Evelyn, which was built by who? King Folk, ruler of Jerusalem, the father of Godfrey the fifth Canaanite Jew, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem, the father of Henry II, the father of John, Richard I, Henry III, the father of Edward I, father of Edward II, the father of Edward III. Okay, very important. And we're talking about Edward I crusade in the Holy Land, which ended the Crusade War. Why? Because he passed laws in regards to the successorship of that promised land that was promised to those who came to the understanding of who they was. Okay? All right? We passed laws not for the Holy Land over there, but the Holy Land over here, because this, in fact, was the crown. The kingdom of, or the English Empire within the continent of North America. Okay? Very important. The overseas possessions was those territories in what you call North Africa, Iberia, Venezuela, and what they call the UK. Okay? But the home seat was right here in what we call North America. Okay? Very, very, very important. All right? As I come to my closing, let me start here. All right. Edward the First, or Edward's Longshank, last crusade in the Holy Land was the last crusade based upon the promised land. We know promise was that which was the promise that would carry out based upon the trustees, which Edward the First was a trustee. For the present heirs, which live in the present day here in North America. All right? Very, very, very important for you to understand that. Why do I say that? Let's look at this in the closing. Year 6000. The Hebrew year 6000 marked, according to the classical rabbinical Jewish sources, the latest time for the initiation of the Messianic age, versus what the Talmud, Midrash, and the Zohar say, specify that the date by which the Messiah will appear is 6,000 years from the date of creation, which is 3785. Okay, the end of the year, which we call the time of the Masonic age, which you call Revelation, will be 5786, which is in your year, it will be 2025. And the Hebrew year would be 5786, and in our year, it's 2987. According to the tradition, Annus Mundi calendar started at the time of creation, placing creation at 3761 BC. Okay? The current 2025 and 2026 Hebrew year is 5786, which is shortly close to what? The end of what we call the 6,000 year period, the age of the Messiah. So let's just start from the very beginning. 1 BC. If you go to 1 BC, means Berber calendar. You see, the year is 950. King Edgar in 950 was coronated, okay, somewhere around that time. King Edgar the Peaceful is living, and that also is the time of the birth of Christ, as we see here. Okay, who you call on Christ is yet to be understood, but this is King Edgar to us. Because in the year 950, under the Berber calendar, because you don't see it English read now here till 1065. Okay, and if you look at the Hebrew calendar, the year is 3760 or 3761, which means the creation of the world. Okay, so while your world is be created in your story, the Anglo-Saxon Berbers are already here. And the year is 950 AD, Annos Dominius, and the year of our Lord. Okay, because in 1 BC, if you go to 1 AD, it will be 951. Let's see if we can do that. It won't allow us to do it. I'm not going to mess around with that. So we see 1 BC is the year 950, which is for you who follow the Hebrew Bible, all right, it's the date of creation, okay? And we know that the Messiah age will be 5786, which to us will be 2975, and for you will be 5785, which let's go to the year 2025, which is the present year. The year 2025 and the Berber year is 2975. You got to pick your calendar, okay? You need a calendar to prove your existence, going back to what we call time immemorial. And as you can see, there is no English calendar here. There is a British Vietnam year with the reigning monarch as Charles III, okay? And in the Hebrew calendar, it's the year what? 5785. This is the end of your world, okay? To us, it's 2975. To you, it's 5785. And to them, it's 2025, okay? But there is no English reading our year. Why? Because that didn't start till William the Conqueror. Let's go to 1065 AD in lieu of my closing. In 1065, William the Conqueror invaded England in 1066. The last king in 1065 was Edward the Confessor, who was in fact a Berber, okay? Because you see here, Berber calendar, all right? 2015, you see English reading our year, but there is no reigning monarch in English reading our year because that don't start to who? William the Conqueror, okay? William the Conqueror. Let's read it in week. Okay. The regnal year of English and British monarchs are the official regnal years of the monarch of the Kingdom of England from 1066 to May 1707. So these are the people who are identifying themselves in English but are not English because the actual English are the Berbers, okay? And we spoke English, okay? The language of the Berbers is the English language, brothers and sisters, okay? And everybody speaks English but are not the English people, okay? And if you did try to classify at the English people, you have to start at 1066, when William the Conqueror invaded England, which was the home of the Berbers. Okay? So with that, make sure I carry everything. If you want your birthright, all right, you want your birthright. Because we know Edward the First, at the last crusade, all right, it ended because now we passed law. He passed laws to preserve the promise of the land. Okay, he passed laws based upon the land, going all the way back to our God, which was King Edgar the Peaceful. Okay, he promised that we would live in peace. Okay, on the land. So the endurance condition of us was a law passed by Edward I in 1285 and Queen Victoria passed in 1290 to forbid the selling of the promised land, okay? Of the promised land. The same king who entered the last crusade, Edward I, and there is our line, okay? And I can show you the statute and present legislation, and I'll close on that right here. Nullius tempus secure reggae. Let me show you this. Nullius tempus secure reggae. No time runs against the king. All right. Meaning that I'm not subject to what we call statute of limitations. I'm not subject to the rule of perpetuity. I'm not subject to what we call on wait and see law. Okay. I have the right of reversion or remandment in lieu of our lawful claim. Okay. But it only can be done by your king. Let me go here and then I'll close out. This is what the law says. Beware of sheep and wolf clothing. Beware of a wolf in sheep clothing. Okay? This is Jersey Revised Statute 4-3-2. The things and honors, manors, lands, tenements, or hereditaments, or estates of inheritance that's perpetual at the common law, held either by the King of England or any other person, or body politic or corporate at any time before July 4th, 1776. That's before they declared their independence. Remember, a legal fiction created a bridge between the literal text of the law, filling the gap without breaking the letter of the law. This is very important because of this statute here, 46:3-15. They donuts condition their butts. The statute in regards to intel estates that belongs to you, heirs. Okay? Heirs. Passed by that king, Edward the First. All right? The one at the last crusade. The reason why the crusades are over is because of this law. All right? This is why the crusades are over. This is the promised land here, y'all. It's in statute, not over there. Whenever any is conveyance or will or instrument in writing shall hereafter be made, wherein any grantee, that means us, parts of grantee, devisee, or other persons to become seized in law, becoming seized mean taken. We know seizing means possession, but to become seized means to be taken in law and equity of such a estate and real estate as under statute, meaning real estate is not estates and land. Real estate is property that sits on the estate. And we understand that we're not interested in the property that's on the estate. We're interested in the estate itself, which is the land, based upon the statute passed by Edward I, called the Statutes of Entail, which have been held based upon how our forefathers had, based upon what we call folk right, which the founding fathers took according to 1 Kim versus Ark. Okay, so it's very important that estates entails were abolished by those colonists now called states because and states entail with their donors conditional Bush, which is the statute right here, passed by our kings. that same crusader. In 1285, while the crusades were going on, the last crusade ended in 1275. Okay, so a couple of years later, he is implemented the Donis Condition of the Bush and Queen of Pretorius. These laws preserve the estate in England and Wales, as well as all the overseas possessions that were controlled by us. The only problem is that the king was not there. Okay, that legal fiction was not there. Now we got somebody over here claiming to be a king, but is not in fact a king. Let's prove it. Beware of sheep and wolf clothing. Beware of a wolf, sheep and wolf clothing, however that saying goes. Okay? This is a person claiming to be King Yahweh. King Yahweh, a distinguished advocate renowned for his spiritual connection to the Holy Ghost, hold a prominent position as the global peace advocate of the Kingdom of Yahweh Incorporated. Beyond his spiritual endeavor, King Yahweh financial prowess shines brightly as he commands a substantial net worth primarily derived from its associated with the organization. You better be careful, okay? This is the individual that they identify as King Yahweh, but don't know nothing about the origin of the promised land according to operation of law, okay? He ain't conveying you nothing, okay? He go around talking and talking about peace when there is no peace, because he's not a God of peace, he is a God of war. They said this individual is the reincarnation of Enki, all right? Here's another article that I'm going to use. The Imperial Majesty King Yahweh. Okay? The Imperial Majesty King Yahweh. And in lieu of everything I said today, you better be careful, because these are the people who recognize King Yahweh. Let's just play it.
I really love your powerful messages, like when you said if good people stop fighting good people, the world would change overnight. I feel like there's some for real power in that message.
That's what we have to do. When good people stop fighting good people, the world will change overnight. That's what we all have to do. And so it is important for us to understand economics is what drives any community, including ours.
Hi, King Yahweh. This is Marla Gibbs. We met a few years ago at the White Party in Los Angeles, and I'm so happy to see that you're still working on the Unified Positive Community Action. That's wonderful. Also, I'm happy to see that you haven't forgotten your global mission to help people around the world. That's really awesome, honey. Keep up the good work.
I was gone to the Imperial King Yahweh's birthday party.
I seen your pictures.
Yeah.
I seen what they're looking like.
You know what?
Yeah, they had the royal drapes on with the crowns. And,
Yes.
Okay, I seen you with your bodyguards.
You know what?
Okay.
How easily we are fooled.
everybody is positive here. I haven't felt any negative energy since I've been here. I've been taking pictures with the family. I just feel like comfortable. I feel like I've known these people forever and I have never met any one of them. That's the energy I like to be around. So I'm gonna enjoy this house, enjoy the people. But I'm having a good time here. It's like positive energy and that's what I needed.
King Yahweh says happiness is a gift. You can't give it if you don't have it. Peace and blessings to you. Peace and blessings to you. Truer words were never spoken.
Hey, yo, King Yahweh, this is D.L. Hughley. I'm taking this quick moment to recognize you, King Yahweh, for your humanitarian work around the world. There are not many people who dedicate their lives on the level that you most certainly have, and I take my hat off to you. As soon as I'm wearing a hat, I'm going to take it off to you. But make sure you keep doing the good work you're doing. We appreciate it. Take care. God bless.
King Yahweh, what's up, man? Said the entertainer, just want to shout you out, man. Appreciate you for being out there, spreading all that love, man, doing all that positivity, throwing that peace out there, throwing those good blessings out there on a global level, man. You doing it, spreading love. That's what it's all about. I see you, man. God bless you and keep it up, all right? King Yahweh, let's go.
To the kingdom of Yahweh, it is a beautiful feeling to be a part of what you're doing. Much love to King Yahweh. Love from London.
You can see, my brothers and sisters, the king is supposed to be a global advocate for peace. And he's over here in North America, in Georgia, all right? Supposed to be advocating for peace. And everybody, superstars know who he is, but the people don't know who he is. Very important to understand that, but not the peace over there in what we call Israel or Palestine or Canaan, which is where he's supposed to be establishing the peace and ending the war. But he can't do that because we know Yahweh is a God of war. So understand that I come to renew your story, which is a story that you were not told about. I'm going to greet you as I always greeted you, as our King, Christ, King Edgar the Peaceful, greeted you. And that's in peace.